What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again, and this time we are here with Ezra of the Almighty Allegaeon. Thank you for coming on the show today. Always great to have Allegaeon on.
Yeah, buddy. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here too. Send my regards to Greg. Normally he's on the show, but it's great to be able to talk with you in particular. So the new album, The Ossuary Lens, your first album back with Allegaeon in over a decade. Like, this is really inspiring and really exciting to hear when I heard you were coming back. For you, did this feel like you were picking up where you left off after Elements of the Infinite, or was you and the whole band collectively saying we're making a follow-up to Damnum, the previous record?
Dude, that's a solid question, man. Since I was gone for so long, I was gone for 7 years. So I had a lot of time to kind of come back down to earth and learn a lot of things. And as far as like it kind of being a continuance of Elements, it never really felt that way, even though that was probably the most successful album that I was a part of. There was always this kind of thing that was looming over me, which was Damnum, coming back into the fold. It was an interesting story. Like, I got a phone call just one day from Greg, and he was just like, hey, we're looking for a fill-in for this European tour. And I was like, immediately, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Yes, this is a chance at redemption, right? And so we went out to Europe, and 11 days in Berlin, that's when they asked me to officially or permanently join again. And, kind of weighing everything at that time, this was almost 2 years ago or 3 years ago now, but weighing everything at that time, that's when like Damnum was still in its album cycle. And to me, when I listened to Allegaeon's discography, I know my material very well, but I was just not a part of the metal. I wasn't focused on it. I didn't pay attention. I just didn't need it in my life at that time. And it was interesting going back into the fold because I was aware of Damnum because we were playing some of the songs from that album on that European tour. And to me, man, like, Damnum is a work of art. That thing is such a well-refined, so in-depth type of, I guess, just an album or whatnot that, going into it, it was kind of bracing for something new in particular. And what I mean by that is, like, anything that I've done with Allegaeon has been very science-driven, or like some kind of relation to those fields, those genres, if you will, and something that Riley really introduced in Damnum, even prior to that, was more interpersonal type stuff. And to me personally, music is kind of not worth it to me unless it touches you or like makes you feel something, whether it's like happiness, sadness, joy, whatever. And to me, when you can write like more interpersonal type of lyrics, that gains a bigger connection from me to the music. So therefore, I really put my heart and soul in it. And so coming back into the fold post Damnum, it was like kind of a mix of both, man. I was like, I wanted to really keep that true to the core grit that Allegaeon had for the first 3 albums that I was a part of. And then as they built, as they went on and became more refined, I took note of that, and that's something that I definitely wanted to stay on. Being that Damn It is such a in-depth type of album, it just doesn't seem so surface level to me. That was something that I really wanted to make sure that I nailed on this album. So that's where I think like the Ossuary Lens is going to be my proudest work, because it's got the most of my soul in it. It was to the point that I wasn't even demoing music before going into the studio. I was just like literally using any second, any minute that I could get to work on the lyrics, because I really wanted them to be like more of a story, more poetic rather than just like straightforward and like, this is what it is. I wanted it to paint pictures, and I wanted to like really lean on the artistic element of it rather than just throwing a whole bunch of scientific words out there.
Yeah, well, so which I gotta tell you, Allegaeon has definitely been notorious for that. I will say you're definitely not known, regardless of what era of Allegaeon we're talking about, you're definitely not known for the simplicity of your album titles to an extent. I would say. I think you just muted your microphone, by the way. I just got.
I did. I was
okay.
coughing.
No, you're good. Okay. But when you compare like fragments of form and function and form shifter and then elements of the infinite, and then you are singing stuff off of Proponent for Sentience and Apoptosis and Damnum, does it maybe resonate with you singing the material that Riley was a part of versus the material that you were a part of? Because I was watching videos, and I got to tell you, you are a technically great vocalist. You execute your material as well as the previous material to a T. So I'm very excited to see what you bring with that. So just does it resonate with you though more when you are singing the 2016, 2022 era music?
This is awesome. Yeah, it does resonate with me because I transport any kind of older material, chances are like God particle, things like that. It's that scientific base. So to me, like I mean this in a sense with praise and positivity, but it's kind of stagnant for me. Like it's, I'm talking about double helixes and shit like that, where if I kind of tap into like some of Riley's older stuff, like To Carry My Grief, that Through to Pour in Silence, that song, or like A Beast in Worms or whatnot, a lot of the times I can take whatever that content is or the context and apply it to my life. That's a magical thing about music, is like a lot of it is up to interpretation or for interpretation. So when I listen to a lot of Riley's lyrics or whatnot, I try to do it justice, because firstly, he's a fucking incredible vocalist, but secondly, I want to do it justice because I know that it meant a lot to him. And, with that being recorded and fans listening to that became a part of them. So I have to do not only Riley justice, but I have to do the fans justice, just to make sure that it's being portrayed or delivered how it was intended.
Yeah.
So in a lot of times, man, I feel it. I can feel his lyrics as well.
Well, being that this year also marks 15 years since the debut of Allegion with fragments of form and function, and I'm wondering a couple of things about that. One, because I ask, when a band tells me that when they're releasing a new album and a band tells me, this is the music we've always wanted to make, this was the vision we always had, life is unpredictable. You never know where you're going to be in 5, 10, 15 years from now. And so, like, can you say that when you compare fragments of form and function, and then you compare that to the Ossuary Lens, is this the music that you always envisioned making? Or being that, there was so much history and so many albums in between then and different eras, that this is like really like you never expected this to form when you compare it to your first record?
I absolutely love where Allegion's gone in all this. It's achieved a depth that I haven't really seen with the band. Being a dude that doesn't listen to too much metal, like I primarily listen to like a lot of like hip hop or like sad girl music, just pop shit that has like a lot of hooks and repetition. What I've noticed a lot between like fragments to Ossuary is like the level of depth, man. Like, we're recording everything for fragments or whatever, but now things have just tremendously changed. When we were in the fragments era, we would write everything like Ryan would write half the songs, Greg would write half the songs, and it was all via email. And we just kind of got into the studio and hammered it out. But this was way more executed professionally. There was just so many different little steps that we took for Ossuary that really refined it. When, like, I guess, for instance, like, prior to the Ossuary, even recording or anything like that, we met up for a writing retreat. We spent a week tearing up all the songs, restructuring them, making sure that we felt that it was achieving that depth that we wanted. And then when we go into Flatline Audio, which is Dave Otero, the engineer producer, we spend another 3 days re-tearing up all those songs again to make sure that it's sonically there for everybody, and really bringing in that Dave perspective helps a lot. And so with those two moves of the writing retreat and tearing the songs up with Dave and such, like, that also puts Dave in a position where he's much more familiar with the songs prior to recording, versus when Fragments era was around, we just kind of went there and just laid it down and just hoped for the best. So over the course of the, those 7 albums or whatnot, this being the 7th, we've really learned this routine And we were also, I think a big part of it is like when you're recording albums or when you're doing really anything, there's an excitement level and you just want to get it out and do it all. And now that we've had so many albums and so many years to progress, that by the time that we got to this point, we're familiar with the routine. We're familiar with what we need to do in order to get it recorded and such. So that opts for, or it allows for a lot more opportunity to kind of tear up these songs and try to redo things, or like enter a level of depthness that we haven't really done, like multi-layering or like reoccurring themes, just like those extra little bells and whistles that we didn't really have time for in the past. So kind of to answer your question, I mean, I see a very, very vast difference, because to me, Fragments is very like, you got 16 tracks, just record it. Whereas in like this Ossuary Lens, we have 1 million tracks and we could, enter into any level of depthness, and we're much more calm and collected as we enter into newer albums.
Well, a lot of people have said that, this is rock and roll, this is metal, we got to stay young forever. I could not disagree more with that philosophy, in the sense, look how much better, look, we're all freaking stupid in our 20s. We all have ADHD. We all want to, put out some of the best work we've done, or like we all, not put out the best work, we all want to put out as much work as possible, get on tour and just, go crazy in the studio. When you're an adult, you have more experience, you have more wisdom that you can apply to your lyrics, you have more thought, you've experienced more trials and tribulations. So in the end, I think there is an essence of growing up that we have to do as artists in order to create the better craft that we do.
Absolutely. That stuff that's like naturally comes with time and progression and becoming more familiar with your instrument and stuff. It's just like a lot of that excitement kind of tames down, where you can actually think clearly and achieve whatever goal you're trying to knock out, really.
Do you, lyrically speaking, have you always needed music to come up with lyrics, or has a lyrical idea maybe helped influence the song? And has your lyric process completely changed in the 7-year gap that you were out of Allegaeon?
I mean, I think Dave Otero said it best when we were recording Ossuary. He was like, dude, you really like took a poetic vibe to this. And that was something that I was really trying to consciously do at the time. I just didn't want everything to sound so like Wikipedia page, I wanted it to kind of paint a picture, and I really wanted to like massage that poetic muscle and kind of bring it to a new level of art in my own findings. So like my lyric writing has changed immensely. I mean, I use a lot of the same structure and a lot of the same like mentality going into it. I find out whatever topic it is. So a lot of times that just happens in everyday life. I'll just be going about my day and something will come up, whether it's an article or a discussion with somebody. And if it piques my interest, maybe I'll bust open the Chat GPT or something, try to get some more information about it. And then I tear up the old Word documents and get my rhyme zone out, and like any kind of thesauruses and shit, just to make sure that I have a way to navigate whatever conversation I'm trying to have at that moment. I'm super big on like syllable counting. That's like a big part of it. So like a lot of rappers, there's a dude named Prof, one of those young rappers. What they'll do is they'll go into the booth and they'll start like kind of humming out a cadence and like some kind of rhythm that they kind of bob with. And to me, I didn't realize that I did that until kind of more recently when I was more conscious to it. But when I'm writing, man, I listen to it and I just like make up words, and like if I have like a good third or fourth word, I'm like, okay, I like that word a lot. Then I'll try to like on my second time through, then I'll try to kind of rhyme that word, and I'm like, it starts to develop into like a cool cadence, and then I apply words to it. So it's like I'll bounce my head around, find the cadence that I like, and then I'll count the syllables, and then I'll go to the words after that to fit the puzzle. The big difference, I guess, with this album versus anything that I've done, or even with respect to previous Allegiant material after I left, was this is the first album that I wrote interpersonal lyrics to. It's always been a science band, and believe you me, we do absolutely have those science songs on there, but this was definitely a time for me to kind of get some things out over the last decade, man. It was a trying decade for me, and this was like a golden opportunity, the golden ticket to kind of put it into a artistic format. And so with respect to some of the lyrical writings that Riley did, and with respect to older Allegiant material with the science stuff, I think I did a pretty good job of marrying the two for this album. And so, yeah, I think the big change would be the interpersonal stuff, which I'm pretty proud of on this album.
Does it resonate with, kind of a similar question I asked earlier, but does lyrical subject matter affect the energy or maybe resonate with you differently depending on what you are singing about? Or in the end, it is your vocals, it is your lyrics, you're jamming with Allegiant. You do have sort of like a strategy that applies to every song and lyric that you have.
It definitely is an energy that comes with it. And whenever I think about this kind of stuff, I think about more of the live performance, because that's really where I thrive. That's what I love to do out of it. Recording, fucking writing, out of everything. It's all about the live performance for me. And so it's kind of going back to that transport thing, is like, if I'm singing a song like Behold God I Am, what I'm thinking about is, okay, I'm going to get these fucking crowd members like fist pumping, screaming their haze. So like there's always this like attachment or connection to the crowd. But the content wise or context of like Behold God I Am, that's like a badass motherfucker, one of those kind of songs, you know, like. And so to kind of bring that energy to like a crowd of 1,000 people, like fucking, you know, I'm kind of controlling the environment. But then if I go into like a song, say, I don't know, we'll say like a Beast in Worms, or like if like the newer song Driftwood, since it has a different type of thinking process and a different message overall, then I tend to sink into whatever that is. So like if that song Driftwood, if we're playing that, then that's where my brain is. But I'm also like partly thinking about how can I get the crowd to engage with it? But a lot of times it's depending on whatever the context is of the song, that's where my brain and emotions go. So I am heavily impacted by the lyrical content of the music, but it's not anything that like subdues me or puts me down. It's more like a vibe thing.
Do you think, because Greg said one of my favorite quotes in an interview back in 2019, we were promoting Apoptosis, and he said, Mike writes his shit, I write mine, and it's rare that the two shall intertwine. So I'm wondering if that also applies to the vocals. Do all of you need to be in the same emotional headspace and be in the same sort of mind frame when composing and writing music together? Or is it better if you're all in your own individual worlds? Because your music has a lot of contrast and a lot of experimentation involved as well. So is it better if you're all in your own individual worlds, and in the end, it's rare that the two intertwine? It was like a freaking mystical caveman writing when he said that. Like,
Greg would fucking say that, dude. But he's right.
I have not forgotten it. We went through a global pandemic, the fucking world nearly ending 1,000 times, and I still have not forgotten that quote since he said that.
I'm gonna have to remind him of that, dude.
I doubt he remembers it. You could watch that interview and you'll understand why. It was the record release show, so we were all having a good time.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's fucking Greg, and he's so right. You know, my experience with Legion's been a little different than the other folks there. You know, being Mike took Ryan's place, and then Greg being that solid member that's always been in the band and shit. Like, you know, they write riffs, and then we reorder those riffs, and that's kind of it. And not to like pull away from what they do is very valuable, important, very hard to do lyrically. So like the beginning stages of Allegiant, the earlier albums, I think Fragments, I only wrote half of that album. Like, wow. It turned out to be like, I think it was Fragments I wrote half. Form Shifter I wrote like 60-70%, and then Elements I wrote like 80% or some shit. And then the Ossuary Lens, because there's that big gap, Ossuary Lens, I wrote the whole thing aside from there's this thing that Greg and I like to do. We started doing it during Biomech and Secrets of the Sequence. Is we kind of look at like writing lyrics as like a hangout sesh, and it's always very fun. So we wanted to at least get one of those on the album. And then also Stancil, Michael, he's got a fucking phenomenal voice. There's something's wrong with that kid. Like the guy is just good at anything he fucking touches, and he's so young, and I hate him for it. And I don't know. There's going into this album, we were really like thinking like, let's lean on all the talents, dude. And like Stancil's got talent, man. We need to express some of that. So the one song, there's a song called Dark Matter Dynamics that Greg and I wrote. That one was co-writing. And then also Stancil and I co-wrote Wake Circling Above. But aside from that, everything else is me. And wow. It was another stab at trying to do the whole interpersonal thing, like really kind of diving into the inner workings of emotions and shit like that. So that was where it really was different for this album, because I've never done that ever on an Allegaeon album, and it was so nice to do it. It felt more natural. I was able to bring out, I think, just better content just overall, like.
I mean, I wanted to say,
artistic freedom.
Like you mentioned the interpersonal aspect, and that makes me even more excited for the rest of the world to hear this album because, and I'm not saying it like it's a bad thing, but I look at the artwork for Allegaeon, I look at the album titles, Apoptosis, Proponent for Sentience, you Fragments and Form Shifter. It's a very scientific band. I've compared you a lot to be more like a progressive version of Fear Factory in a sense. Sure. with that. So to take now, not abandon it, but to bring the scientific years of having this scientific element and this very progressive sort of obscura universal sort of context in your music, and then bring it very personal, I think is really going to make more of an impact on the sound than people can realize.
I think it will be. To me, like, of course, I want this to be successful, right? It's death metal, so we already have things against us. I'm yelling. I'm a fucking cheerleader yelling, and that's not always the most listenable product for people, So I get it. But with the interpersonal aspect, dude, I think that it really does achieve the goal that I set out to do, and that's just for people to connect more to the music, like. A lot of our fans are nerds. You're going to be walking into Nerdtown, USA, Population 1 already when you're listening to 5 million notes being tossed at your face by 2 fucking savant guitar players, along with Jeff and Boo Boo, laying it down as well. And so you already got a lot to deal with. And, then now you have some guy yelling about the Fibonacci sequence or like evolution or fucking the God particle. Like, it's a lot. And so, but it also attracts a certain type of person or a certain type of fan. Whereas I think, and of course, I want Allegaeon to be successful. I want it to be well known. I want to make history with this band. And so bringing that interpersonal aspect, one, it's more natural to me and it feels better. But 2, it's more relatable to people. Like people, if they listen to Driftwood and they've gone through, certain trials and tribulations within their own life, they might connect to that. And using more of this like poetic vibe, it does leave it a little bit more open for interpretation for those listeners to kind of gravitate to or latch onto. So I think with the interpersonal thing, I think it was a huge win. I think that, of course we're going to fucking piss some people off. Okay.
Well, isn't that what metal's for?
Exactly. If I'm not making you slightly angry, I'm not doing my job.
No, again, you said it yourself. This is death metal. I have 2 more questions for you. But one is kind of to bring the emotions into your sound. When you're going into a vocal booth or a recording studio, it's a very, static and very controlled environment in a way. Like, it almost seems like it's the most emotionless place you could be. So how do you take the emotion and reflect that into that sound in such an isolated and very controlled, very like not atmospheric room, if you will?
Um, Dave's setup is pretty nice, man. It's like you go into this room, and I think what's also helpful is I'm already used to it, man. I've done several albums there already, so I'm already used to the vibe. He's only increased the vibrations there since I've been gone. So like you go into the room, you got cool lighting. I could customize it however I want. Of course, I look to my left and I have a painting of Kerry King naked. Thanks, Michael Stansel.
Of course,
so that's always good inspiration.
Of course, he would come up with that one.
Lovely inspiration. He paid a lot of money for that painting too.
Oh my God.
It's fucking ridiculous. I don't know if you've seen a picture of it, but it's on the internet. And really, I don't know, man. It's because I think I'm so locked in up top that, and I'm shameless, man. I think it's from some of the trials and tribulations I've gone through that I don't have shame, bro. I don't get embarrassed, really. I just kind of own it. So it doesn't matter where I'm at. I could lock that in wherever I'm at. So if I'm in a stale environment, if I'm live, if I'm at my grandparents' house, I can lock it in and I can achieve transportation to wherever that land is that song is representing at that time. So I don't ever see an issue with where I'm at and trying to lock it into certain emotions.
You know what it is why I think people, by the way, get really pissed off at tech death bands and all this? Because you guys, Archspire, like every like tech death band and progressive death metal band that has some of the most incredibly complex compositions with some very thought-provoking lyrics and concepts and all this, and then you see the people behind the band and they are the least serious people I've ever met. Ironically, the most serious musicians who are like very uptight, very manager focused, and very like the only ones who want a layout of every question I'm gonna ask them are always like the rock and roll chill bands in a way. And then the most technically proficient musicians are the ones like Allegiant or Archspire, and they are just like the goofiest, funniest, like least serious people I've ever known. Like a picture of Kerry King naked, like.
That's kind of interesting, man. I don't know why I thought this, but have you ever heard of that thing where like Steve Jobs and some other folks, they only wore black t-shirts because they didn't want to apply any extra brain power to like what they were going to wear. They wanted to use all that memory, that RAM towards whatever projects they're working on.
Wow, I've never thought about that, but I haven't worn anything other than black in the last 15 years, so
yeah.
Now I have
so it's
excuse.
Like to alleviate some of that thought or thinking, they just were like, okay, I'm going to make my whole wardrobe this, and now I don't ever have to think about it again. And I don't know why that reminded me of that, but it's kind of like that. They're so proficient, and you have to understand, like my experience and my thought process towards this is I'm the guy that ended up with a bunch of cool musicians. I don't view myself up there like other people do. I'm just associated with it. And so I'm still like jaw dropped every time I fucking hang out with these guys because they're always doing the coolest nerdery shit you've ever seen. So, but it's like the black t-shirt thing is like they apply so much brain power, so much effort into their writing, into the technicality and the performance aspect, that when it comes down to like the interviews or like the fucking videos, nobody cares. We don't give a shit. Like essentially the music will speak for itself, and it does. But yeah. I can see how it would play out like that. How it'd be like the people that you wouldn't really expect it from are the more uptight people.
Yeah. It's honestly like it really is something to behold. Like that should be the next scientific concept that may be explored. Like call it something like the questionable essence of seriousness. I don't know, something like that. So
yeah, no, it's a great idea. I just don't. I'm thinking about it now because you got my gears turning, and I wonder why that is.
Yeah, it really is. And also the death metal musicians too are the old school Tampa, Florida, death metal, the nicest people I've ever met in my life. Even Glenn Benton, which his reputation, one of the nicest people I've ever interviewed. So it is really like something interesting. You'll have your blackened satanic death metal bands where they take themselves a little too seriously and whatnot, but it really is something to behold. I'm gonna cite a couple interviews as a reference to this whole theory.
Yeah, that's fun, dude.
Yeah, the psychology of metal. So before we go, before we go even deeper down a rabbit hole, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Most of all, thank you for your music, for the previous Legion albums and this brand new album as well, for making another great soundtrack to the year of 2025. Is there just anything else with the Legion you'd like to promote? I know you got the Warbringer tour coming up. What else could we be expecting, if you're allowed to say at this very moment, of course?
Yeah, Warbringer coming up real soon here. Right now we are in the sticks of planning Europe. So if everything goes according to plan, which granted, death metal doesn't always work out that way. Things are looking pretty good for Europe this fall, if but we're all we're trying to touch some markets that we haven't really touched. Like Japan would be nice. We've been talking about some kind of crazier ideas, like maybe even touching base in China, which would be wild as fuck. And Mexico would be nice. We need to really get to Mexico. Finland would be cool because Helsinki is one of our biggest markets. Like, it's really just trying to get us out to like a lot of these markets that we haven't really touched. But there's been a lot of like structural changes. We took on management ourselves, so we're self-managed now. Some other changes within the company. So I think that like as Ossuary starts to kind of take off, as these singles get released, you probably start seeing a lot more activity from us. Just right now, it's just kind of this holding stage of just let's knock out this tour and let's really hope that the rest of our year fills up.
Hell yeah. Well, I look forward to having a year full of Legion. So thank you so much. And most of all, welcome back. Great to have you back. Everybody, we are here with Allegaeon, the Ossuary Lens. Be sure to pick that up. We will see you next time on Heavy New York.
Okay.